Hey everyone, thanks for joining. My name is Narcoleptic Frog, and this is the first video in a new series I'm going to be recording about the Redstone Multimeter mod. And so if you haven't heard of this before, it's a project I've been working on for the last couple of months, and I think it's finally in a state where it's actually useful for other people, and so I thought it'd be a good idea to make some videos describing the mod, how it works, and showing some things you can do with it. So my original idea for the Redstone Multimeter mod was just to make a tool that would help with debugging redstone circuits. And I was motivated to do this because, at least, for the circuits that I was building, I found debugging them to be an extremely tedious process. So, I'd build a circuit with some expectation of, what it would do, and whenever it didn't do what I thought it should, I would spend a lot of time, trying to figure out where exactly, my understanding was wrong. And often this would involve things like installing a tick rate mod and slowing the game down to like 1 tick per second, and then flying around the circuit while it was running, just hoping to catch the one thing that didn't make sense to me. And so the whole idea behind the Redstone Multimeter mod is just to make it easier to directly observe what's going on in your circuits. So I think the easiest way to give you a pretty good idea of what the mod is useful for is just to run through one really basic example. So I've got this simple circuit set up in front of me, where when I press the button, it powers the repeater, and the repeater in turn powers the lamp. And I want to think about the following simple question. How long does it take from when I press the button until the lamp becomes powered? And you might think to yourself, well, I know that repeaters have 2 game ticks of delay for every level on their delay setting. And so since this repeater is on the shortest delay, maybe I should expect 2 game ticks of delay from when I press the button to when the lamp turns on. And that would be a natural assumption based on what you might have read on the Minecraft wiki or from experiments that you've run and so on. And so the way we're going to investigate that using the mod is by placing a meter on the lamp. Okay, and so I just pressed M, which is the meter hotkey button by default, and you'll notice that that's highlighted the lamp in this red color. And there's also a bar up at the top left that says meter 0, and what that bar is showing us is whether or not the lamp was powered or not for the last 60 game ticks. So we can rename the meter, so we'll call it meter name lamp, just because that's a little bit more meaningful. And if we press the button, we do in fact see that the meter became powered for 20 game ticks, which is 1 second, and that's the length of the pulse that you get from a stone button. So we can also pause the meters to make it a little bit easier to look at what's going on. So I just pressed the pause meter key, which is N by default. And then we can scroll around and look at different parts of the timeline to get a better sense of what was going on. Okay, so if we want to measure the delay between the button and the lamp, a pretty natural idea is to put a meter also on the button. So we'll call this one meter name button. Okay, and then we're just going to run the circuit and see what happens. So we press the button and we pause the meters to take a look at what's going on. And we see a couple of weird things. So the first one is that there's only a 1 game tick delay between the button being pressed and the lamp turning on. And that's sort of not quite fitting with our mental model of there being a 2 game tick delay for a repeater on the lowest setting. But then, sort of weirdly, we see that there is a 2 game tick delay from when the button becomes unpowered to when the lamp becomes unpowered. And so that's sort of kind of confusing about what's going on here. I don't really want to get into the details of what causes that strange behavior, but it turns out that when a player inputs something like clicking on a button or flipping a lever or standing on a pressure plate, that gets handled slightly differently than other, redstone related events. And that leads to this weird quirk of a 1 game tick shorter delay for this repeater. And that's the kind of thing that, if you're not familiar with, that would be very difficult to observe. And so the thing I want to point out is that this was extremely simple to see using the Redstone Multimeter mod. We just put the meters down and we immediately noticed that things weren't matching up with what we thought they should be. Yeah. Now that we've seen a quick example of the mod actually working, I want to spend the rest of the video talking in a little bit more detail about what the mod actually shows you and about some features that weren't covered in that first demo. And the first thing I'd like to talk about is what does it mean for a block to be powered? And so the way this works in the Redstone Multimeter mod is that each block type has its own rule for deciding if it's powered or not. And in most cases, this sort of matches what your intuitive idea of what a block being powered should mean. So for example, for levers and buttons, what the rule says is if the lever or button is currently outputting a signal, then the block is powered. And if it's not, then the block is unpowered. A lot of blocks don't have sort of a natural interpretation this way. So for example, a concrete block, if you look at the game mechanics, it has no idea about being powered or not. And so what the mod shows in this case is whether or not a redstone lamp in the same position would be powered. So we see that we get a 19 game tick pulse on the concrete, which matches exactly what we would get for the redstone lamp. And so this might seem like a bit of a weird decision, like why do it that way? But I think this actually matches what people normally expect when they're thinking about blocks being powered or unpowered in the game. Another really useful feature of the mod is that it can show you the update order when multiple blocks become powered in the same game tick. And this can be really helpful for debugging circuits that depend on that update order. And also, if you're just learning about the update order, it can be really helpful to be able to see it without having to, do complicated experiments or reason about it from first principles. And so in this simple example, I have a lever that's going to power a repeater and a comparator, which will in turn power these two pistons. And which of the pistons extends will depend on the update order. In particular, the one that got powered first will extend first, taking up the only available space for the piston head, and the other one will just stay retracted. And so we can test what's going on here by flicking the lever with these 2 meters down. And so we can pause the meter by pressing N, and if we scroll back and forth, you'll see that there's actually this one tick on the meter that's highlighted in a white rectangle. And that's the currently selected tick. And if we select the tick that both the repeater and comparator became powered on, we'll see that there's a little bit of extra information that pops up on the right-hand side of the meter. And what that's showing us is what the order was that these 2 blocks became powered in within that single game tick. And we see that it's showing that the repeater became powered before the comparator. And as expected, that means that the repeater's piston won in the fight with the comparator's piston. The last feature I'd like to mention is that the Redstone Multimeter mod now supports multiplayer servers. So you can debug Redstone contraptions with your friends, or just debug them on the creative servers that you play on anyway. And the way this works is you have to install a fairly recent version of the Carpet mod, which is a server-side mod developed by Nembom and the other SciCraft members. And once you have that mod installed, there's a carpet rule for enabling Redstone Multimeter support, and then anyone who's running the Redstone Multimeter mod on their client will be able to use it as they would in single player on that server. If you'd like more information about how to configure and manage the meters on a multiplayer server, please check out the GitHub page for the mod, which is linked down in the description. So this is the end of the short introduction into the Redstone Multimeter mod. I'm really curious to hear if you think that this is useful or if there are applications that you might use it for. And if you have any recommendations or suggestions for how the mod could be improved, I'd be really happy to hear about that. So please leave comments if you have feedback of that kind. And going forward, I think for the rest of this series, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a couple of interesting things that I've investigated using the Redstone Multimeter mod, and just go through them with you in a little bit of detail to show the ways that I've been thinking about using it and so on. Thanks for watching. My name's Narcoleptic Frog, and I'll catch you next time.